It's up there. Cool. All right, welcome. I think we'll get started now. Yeah, drop that out of the way. Okay. Oh, welcome. Thank you for coming. For those of you who are here in the house, and for those of you who are here on Zoom, my name is David Van Quest. I'm the outreach coordinator for Truckee Tahoe Airport. We're glad you are here tonight. First off, if you're here looking for the gondola to North Star, got bad news for you. It's not happening. It's not going to happen. But this is another exciting edition of the Truckee Airport Fly Safe program, where we're trying to help develop safer pilots. For those of you guys who are local pilots, or for anyone that's tuning in from a distance that travels here often, we're trying to help promote aviation safety. So we've got safer skies and safer communities here. So thank you for tuning in. If you've been here for all three of our Fly Safes so far this year, and you're getting wings credit, look at that. Today, you're getting wings credit knowledge activity number 2, which completes the 3 wings credit knowledge activities you need to do a phase of wings. So now you're ready to go fly with an instructor and do your flight activities, then complete a phase of wings. So thank you for coming. And if you've been here 3 in a row, you're all set. So just a few updates about Truckee Airport while I've got you here. Was anyone here last month for Howard Donner's presentation about staying found? That was pretty cool, right? I took a little flight last Saturday. I don't fly too often, but I rented the Super Hawk for a little trip out to see the Sierra Buttes and the snow conditions there. But before I left, I remembered Howard Donner. And so I took my personal locator beacon. I stuck it in my pocket. I took my iPhone 15, stuck that in the other pocket, and then I had my iPad just on top of my lap. But those 2 rescue devices were secured in case I, exited the plane and I wasn't able to grab my backpack that had the other stuff in it. So, and I put on a jacket because it wasn't even that cold, but still put on a jacket in case you got to stay overnight. And I also flew around having 121.5 on the backup radio. Just some things that I remembered Howard taught us. And anyway, so I hope you guys all learned something from that as well. Like I mentioned, wings credit. If you haven't already, there's a sign-in sheet in the back to get some wings credit. If you're here on Zoom, we're going to have just an attendance report from who was on Zoom, and you'll get wings credit that way as well. Also, as I mentioned, if you got some green plates or cups or whatever, put them in the bin back there on your way out. Some trash. In June, there's going to be an event, the Finer Points of Flying. Howard Donner is one of the CFIs that helps out with that, but they put on these flying airplane camps, I think they call them. And there's going to be kind of this mountain flying course that they do. It's like a full 3-night event where you fly several days with instructors in the mountains. That's going to take place at the Columbia Airport. They're going to do a stop here in Truckee for some mountain training, and there'll be some presentations here in Truckee. For those of you who are in the Fly Safe program in good standing, we are going to offer a discount if you want to join. There's a price tag to join that, but it's a really fun weekend trip. We're not really affiliated with them, but we're going to provide our members a discount. So talk to me or Jeff about how you get that. If anyone's interested in becoming an aircraft owner, if you're not already, there's some posters out in the lobby out there. There's a C-180 that's for sale, 1955. Someone came here the other day and said, "Do you mind if I put up this poster?" I said, "Sure." So anyway, if you want to become an aircraft owner of a beautiful 1955, go see that poster out there. The VASI's working again. I know it was working sort of. It's had a on again, off again history. It's complicated. It's back on. I guess it was saying you couldn't see it from 2 degrees to the left, but some FAA guys were here the other day. They fixed it. Anyway, it's back on. So there you go. Apron project out here, what we call our front yard, is going to get reconstructed. They're going to dig up a big chunk of it out there. We just selected a company to do the project. It's about a $4.5 million project. About a quarter of that's going to be funded by the FAA. And it's going to start sometime late May, hopefully, and take about, hopefully, 12 weeks. We're going to phase it in like 2 periods. So the ramp will be sort of unusable in that front yard. Most of you guys, if you're local, you got your own hangar, you're not really parking out there, but the Quebec taxiway is going to be kind of affected. So just keep that in mind. Speaking of ramps and runways, twice a year we add up some data on how our runways are used, and what we do is we look at like a winter period and a summer period and the breakout of which runways are getting departures and landings. And a big thing, I don't know if you've heard of it, but we strongly encourage folks to depart on runway 2 because it is our quietest runway. There's a lot of open space out there. There's not too many houses in that area, and you can do the departure very easily without screwing it up. And so I ran that data and looked at it. We just filter when it's calm winds so that you have the option to use kind of any runway. And this was, I think, the highest we've ever seen that runway used at about like 45% of departures of like piston engine aircraft, which is like most of this crowd here. So I want to thank you guys for doing that and encourage you to keep that up. It was kind of the first time we've seen it was like an even split of departures off of that runway versus 2.9. Because 2.9, it's easy to screw that up with the winds and the neighborhood. So we're really happy that you guys are using runway 2. So thank you. And lastly, next month, if you're coming for another Fly Safe event, we've got a really great show for you. It's going to be called ATC 101, where our tower manager, Larry Finney, and his friend from Oakland Center, they're going to be here Wednesday, May 14th to talk about air traffic control and how they decide which runways to assign people and IFR traffic and what they're doing for aircraft separation on the ground and in the sky. They've done it a few times here, and we're really excited to have them back. So that's ATC 101. That's our next Fly Safe event. That's it for now. Let's give away some prizes with the raffle. If you got it, you get threw it in there. Rank loss and stuff. Get your tickets ready. Not a whole lot here, so you guys have a good chance. All right, first winner. This is perfect. Third, Fly Safe, size large. This one's going to. He put his name on it. Mr. Bruno, Vince Bruno. There he is. All right. All right. All right, next up, Fly Safe hoodie. Size large. If it doesn't fit, trade with somebody it does. This one's going to 576 233. Hey, all right. All right. Oh, Truckee Tahoe Airport. Fly Safe. This one's going to 576 232. Hey. Okay, and lastly, we didn't forget our people on Zoom. Thanks for tuning in on Zoom. We're going to raffle off this Fly Safe hat in blue. So Kay has a spinny wheel going. I don't think we could really see it, but we trust you. She's spinning it now on Zoom. The winner is Ken Nielsen. So Ken, if you're on there and you're hearing this, you've won this hat. We're not going to mail it to you. You got to come here and get it. All right. Yes. Ken. All right. So that's enough of that. This is the point of the show where I usually will bring on our headliner, but I'm not going to do that myself because Jeff Brown is actually a colleague of our director of aviation, Jeff Manasco. So Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, David. And congratulations, Ken. Come get your hats. Super excited to introduce Jeff F.A. Brown. Quick story, first time how I met him, 2003. Senior captain, brand new to my squadron in Germany. Supposed to be going to Poland about 5 days before we go to Poland. This is early Poland, so 20 some odd years ago. Trip's canceled. Find someplace else to go. My squadron commander says, "Go find someplace in Europe." I'm supposed to take 6130s. So I'm looking through files, shared drives, everything, and I keep seeing all these really good files with Jeff F.A. Brown. I'm like, who's this Jeff F.A. Brown? And so I steal his files, going to RAF Lynham in the United Kingdom. Basically take everywhere it says Brown, delete Brown and type in Manasco, stole all his stuff. And I've done that for 3 assignments in a row. I call my mental twin. We've had a really good fortune that he always goes ahead of me. I copy his work and I keep getting credit for it. And funny story is the 3 times I followed him, never met him in person, but everyone in the C-130 community knows of Jeff Brown. There's also 3 Jeff Browns that fly in the C-130. So the first time I'm in Kuwait, I'm in the Chow Hall line, I see the name tag Jeff Brown. I'm like, oh, hey, Hefe. He's like, no, I'm not Hefe. So I met the other 2 Jeff Browns before I finally met Hefe Brown for reals. Incredible reputation within the C-130 community. He's an Air Force weapons officer, which is not a small feat. Very few pilots go through that program. We both commanded the same wing, Dice Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas. The absolute heart and soul of tactical airlift within the C-130 community. He's retired now for 10 years, built an aircraft that he flew in here today from Boise, Idaho. And in his spare time, he works for the RAND Corporation. So on my last assignment in active duty, I actually worked with him and a team of researchers from the RAND Corporation for what conflict in the Pacific might look like. So just an absolute amazing reputation. And then the really ironic thing is I got here almost 2 years ago. And one of the things that struck me about general aviation was you really have to be dedicated to do continuing education on pilot proficiency, which is kind of the genesis of the fly safe program started here. The second piece that really struck me is in terms of risk management. There's not a lot of buffers there. The individual pilot really has to be proactive. So I was looking online are there apps out there that, if I'm a GA pilot, they help me assess my risk. And I came across the TLAR. I didn't realize it was Hefe's that he developed in his spare time till about 6 months ago. And then we reached out to him like, hey, brother, come out here and talk about the app you developed, because we think it's something that I think a lot of general aviation pilots could use. So with all of that said, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff F.A. Brown to talk and teach. So, thank you.
I feel like I better perform. Thanks for the intro. I appreciate the invite, seriously. Even if everything you said was mostly fine. That's the way it's supposed to be, right? So while he's getting the IT working here, most pilots look down their noses at nerds, and most nerds are like, I don't want to hang out with those guys. They all think they're too cool. And I'm a pilot nerd. So I'm a messed up guy. But it's true, I built an airplane. It had a lot of help at Glass Air in 2016. Glass Air Sportsman, a high wing with plane kind of thing. That's a picture of it. And one of the things that struck me in the experimental world, but really in the certified world too, coming out of the C-130 is the lack of performance data that's easily available inside your cockpit, particularly in the experimental world where they hand you very little in terms of performance data, and they tell you, hey, go test fly your own airplane, come up with your own table, all that sort of thing. In the certified world, most airplanes now have some kind of tabulated thing that you can go to a chapter, and I know everyone does, right? On your day-to-day takeoff. Probably not, but I suspect most of us are professional enough that, hey, if it's closed, you're somewhere sort of scary, you get the book and look up stuff, and that sort of thing. I get it, But that tabulated data stuff is what we did in the E model C-130 decades ago, the one that flew in Vietnam. Fast forward to today, you get in these planes nowadays they got all these fancy avionics, right? Touch screens, could be maps, and just the technology is amazing compared to an analog thing. But it was amazing to me that there's still no. So that's what led me on this journey to lead the create this app, which is part of this briefing. Yes, and I'll show you that. But it's also to talk today's topic about engine loss on takeoff. Some of the physics of that maybe you know about or maybe you don't. Who knows? Maybe someone in here hands up that's done one of these for real. Lost a motor shortly after taking off and had to decide, am I going to land straight ahead or am I going to turn around? Or anyone in the crowd like that? Partial or
Full, but it was in the 20s.
it was in a twin. Well, that's when you have enough motor. It especially helps if you got four. So yeah, you're right. I was going to make a twin joke because my app doesn't do twins, and engine failure and takeoff a whole different ball game in a twin. I'm not going to talk about it. So I guess you're going to learn single engine goop here for today. But let me see if I can get the IT to work. So that's me, my company. That's basically designed to encapsulate the app so that I don't lose my family's future. Because the name of the app is TLAR, which is a military thing. Some of you probably heard of it. That looks about right. Usually said like this. That's about right. I'm going to make it. I'm going to talk to you about the app. Then we'll do the engine loss decision. Am I going to go straight ahead? Am I going to turn back? And we'll talk about the geometry and the physics of it. And then we'll jump back into the app. I'll show you what it can do to help you in this particular problem. And then show you some videos, both that were successful and a couple failed attempts just for learning purposes. Not in a bad way, like crashing, although there's a video that you'll see later. Not me personally. Get to that. So the app itself was born on this exact takeoff, which I happen to be running a video camera off my wing on it. And before breaking the ground here, maybe 45 seconds prior to that, I'm sitting at the end of the runway looking at these trees and I'm wondering, can I make it? I don't have anything that will tell me whether I can make it other than I think so. And so that was the genesis of what became the app. It started as a giant spreadsheet. This was one of about 7 sheets in that spreadsheet, and it basically would go through the mechanics of calculating the aerodynamics of the takeoff, of a turn back, of a landing, of a climb out, all that sort of thing. But it was really clunky and it took a long time. Every time you changed a parameter in this spreadsheet, you had to wait about 30 seconds for it to be in and spit out an answer. And I was like, this is not the right way. All I can do with this is create a tab data, which is better. But so I knew I needed to be an app, and that's what led to creating the app. As Jeff mentioned, I work for RAND now, think tank, and we have a saying there that all models are wrong, some are useful, which is really true. If you're familiar with trying to model anything analytically or mathematically, especially if it's a real life thing that you're modeling, it's going to be wrong in the sense that it's not 100%. But is it good enough to be useful? And that's what matters. The code itself is about 50,000 lines for the analytic piece of it, and in the database it has all the runways. It's gigantic, but it's the same thing. It's over and over and over for different runway types. One of the questions I usually get is, hey, does this thing just go into a lookup table? And the answer is no. It's running the aerodynamics, the physics of an airplane inside of it. And then what I do when I model an airplane is then I benchmark, okay, what is the app spitting out versus what is the tab say that this particular airplane should really do. And the NACA 2412, which is on like every Cessna that you can think of. Most of them are here. I don't have that particular airport. So inputs and outputs. I designed it so that you enter parameters as a pilot that matter to you, the safety distances, how you might fly the plane, how steep you like to fly it, what ratios, stall speed we like to fly, or curl stall approach, or normal approach, that kind of thing. The airfield, either there's all kinds of ways to get airfield data, either out of the database, or you create your own airfield, or there are modes in the app where you can just fly without an airfield at all, and it's just computer based off the altitude. And then for the airplanes that are in there, we've got all the aircraft physics coming off of the sensors. Where is the plane geospatially? What speed is it going? How high is it? What direction is it going? What's its attitude? And then the aerodynamics, which I've mentioned already for modeling. Then out comes all the performance data that you wish you had in the cockpit right in front of you instead of looking it up. Right? Takeoff distances, landing distances, climb performance, that kind of stuff. The last piece there is dynamic, which you'll see here when I do some demos.
Okay, just a second. So this is running on an iPad, something in cockpit.
It runs on it. Well, it'll run on an iPad or an iPhone.
Okay.
I'm going to do some live demos here in a moment, and you'll see that in action.
Okay, and then how do you get I think it was force field down? The aircraft is good. Yeah. Where's that?
So this device is pretty incredible when it comes.
So it has accelerometers.
It has accelerometers. It's got a barometer. It's got GPS. It's coming from. We do have it on the list to integrate with EVISs of the world, but at the moment it's one of the. So when you're on the net, if you will, in the real, like here at Truckee, right, I can take advantage of internet information, right? So the app will pull in METAR data and use it to preload the weather. You've got live Apple Maps from movie map displays, that kind of thing. You can share situation reports with your buddies, get a set of whatever. There's a global runway database that's available whether you're on the net or off the net. If it's in the app, it's just pulling it off of that server or something like that. And then it's an astronomical data. But being a backcountry guy, I really wanted to design this thing to work in the backcountry, meaning when I'm not in touch with the internet, right? And so the weather becomes one of those challenges. How to get weather into the phone if you don't have the internet with you? The short answer to that is if it does touch the net, it downloads all the METARs in the world and it saves them. And so even though they might become dated when you're in the backcountry, you still have access to the last time you touch METAR information. The phone itself, of course, has the barometer, which is programmed to give you altimeter setting. And almost all of us, I bet you all of us fly there like that temperature gauge inside the plane. So you can manually set the temperature using the gauge on. And those three, and then the winds, right? The winds can be either manually or pulled down. I've been experimenting lately with trying to have it figure out the winds and stuff drift angles, but that's not in the commercial app. Yeah, that's a big experiment.
If you have SVN and you're playing, can you pick up METARs? Can you pick up
If you have which?
SVN?
Oh, ADSB. No, it doesn't interface. So like I said, on my list of things to do is to get it to talk to an EFIS, which would be the pathway to getting that. Well, one of them. So no, I don't pull in that. Now, jump over one level, you can put Starlink in your plane now. I don't know if you do that. It's pretty amazing, but that's a whole different topic. But me being a nerd, I'm like, well, that is cool. So. All right, I'm going to give you a short demo on the app, and then we're going to get into engine out stuff. So David's going to help me out here. We're going to attempt the IT gods and attempt to cast the screen into Zoom land and then also up here. And that's like, should be like
That's a level of reality.
hold the thing up there.
I'm ready for you, Jeff. This is we're breaking ground here. We've never done this before.
Never been tried before. Are you ready?
But we tested this out already.
Yeah, we did test it. It didn't. I don't want to say anymore. Okay, we want it to work.
Good so far.
Don't tempt them.
Look at
Oh. I'll set off your list of things that have never happened before. Okay, so this is what the app looks like when it's live. This is one page of it. And I know it looks,
If folks want to come up in the back to see closer, please feel free to come and see.
so the Zoom people can't see the laser beam, but what I'm highlighting here is on the top part of the top half of it where the compass is. I can do it off this one too. All of this is your performance data. So your takeoff distance, you take off over a fence height, in this case 50 feet. Is shown here on the left. You can change your flap settings to take off. Your landing stuff's over here on the right. Same idea, landing distance over a fence height. You can set your brakes, you can set your shoal or normal approach. Down in the bottom right corner, we have cruise information. You can toggle through different cruise modes. Climb information here in the bottom left. So up top is all performance stuff. In the bottom is weather information. So temperature on the left shows you where it's pulling it from. Pressure in the middle, same idea, and then the elevation that's being computed. In this case, for the runway, Oshkosh runway 36. It doesn't have to be that way, but in this particular picture, that's what you're seeing. So, let's try to go back live. So this particular one, you're seeing the full up. There's 3 levels of it. There's a free version that's not as complicated as this, but it does do a lot of stuff. This is the expert level version that you're seeing, which is, so there's the middle one that's the pro level. So let's use why do you say that? Actually, you know, I've only learned a ton coding this. I never coded before. And so the way Apple does it, it's not even possible to do what you said. All right, so ready to cast this again? Do I have to do
I think we're back on the PowerPoint.
no, we haven't done the demo.
Oh, you're still want to do more screen here?
Yeah,
Sorry.
You're for this then.
I think when you move your mouse.
something happened with the mouse. And
All right, you gotta hit the screen mirror one more time.
okay, one more time. There we go. Yeah, I think that's what happened when you move the mouse.
No. I thought you were going back to the PowerPoint side.
Yeah,
I feel it. But there it is. Yeah, we're done.
All right, so again, I'm not going to try to teach you how to use this thing right here. That's why there's a 300-page manual. But as familiarization, so I loaded a set 172. Actually, this is my. You killed the what? Killed it again.
All right, hang on. Bye. Yeah, that's there it is.
There we go. All right.
All right.
So there's a Cessna 172 loaded in the plane or in the bottle right now, and I've chosen Diamond Landing Zone for the purposes of this demo, which is like one of my backcountry trips, and it's actually in Oregon. So one of the modes is to go to a moving map display. So this is that airstrip in Oregon along the Waikiki River. If you zoom way out, puts a 10-mile circle around it with a run-in. The app makes use of color for lots of reasons. In this case, it shows a purple run-in, which tells me that my landing data and my takeoff data are not happy with each other. Meaning I can either land and can't take off, or I can take off and I can't land. So if I go back here, I go, hey, I'm getting a caution code in the top right. It's yellow. You see that for my landing. So I'm violating a safety parameter, and I can fix that by maybe going stall and using max brakes. So now I'm green, right? If I go back to my screen and go to the landing zone, you'll see it's all white now, as opposed to purple. So there's not a flag telling me there's something wrong. Right here, you can see the LZ. If I zoom way in, you can read data about it, you know, its name, lat long, all that kind of stuff. Puts like artificial runway remaining markers there. And it does this on all runways, whether it's DFW, still a tiny place in Oregon. In terms of takeoff stuff, what you see here is an arrow with a dot. The dot's your liftoff point. The arrow is far it takes you to get over the fence height. In the case of this LZ, there's no fence height, so they're coincident. But if it was say 50-foot obstacle, then that arrowhead would be higher. On this one, I can trick it into thinking it's flying, which is good for demos. So now the app thinks it's flying, even though it's not, and it's giving me landing information now. So what you're seeing here is my user entered landing zone distance in the pilot settings, 300 feet. And then this distance is assumed to be how much it takes you to rotate land to start hitting brakes. Then you have your braking distance. And that's all I'm going to do this demo. Back to airplane. Back to the slide deck. So I exhibited at Oshkosh a couple of years ago, and I ran into some of the guys that were on the board of the EAA, and they started asking a lot of questions about this. And in particular, they wanted to know, hey, will it do a turn back? That's what we're going to talk about today. And I said, no, but I have a lot of ideas about how I might be able to make it do it. And so that's what led to a partnership with the EAA. They have a couple of working groups that I've been working with, the angle attack people, and then they have a turn back working group. I won't go into that whole long story, but what popped out is what I'm about to show you. But engine failure on takeoff is really a decision. There aren't good decisions if you're single engine. When you have some more options. You're either going to land off the airport, which is not great, or you're going to try to turn around in a highly stressful situation and maybe stall the airplane. Hopefully not. I think they'll keep it. I hit the thing. It's IT, right? It's what it does. It doesn't matter what time you show up. It won't work. So here's some commonly held turnback thoughts, and I have personally held many of these myself before I started this project. A lot of us will say, are you crazy? I'm not going to do that. And that is a legit criticism, especially if you look at the accident statistics on this stuff. A lot of people, even though they're good pilots, they get stressed out and they try to make this turn and they stall the airplane into the ground. Simple thing. A lot of us, myself included, when I started learning GA, were taught, hey, there's an altitude. You hit 800 feet or 1,000 or 600, there's some number, depends on the airplane. When you hit that altitude, then you're good. You can do it if you want. And the best speed, well, I'm gliding, right? So why wouldn't I fly best flight speed? Seems to be the logical conclusion. I have said those exact words before I started this project. And then bank angle. I've heard both of these. I've heard some other ones that have been kind of crazy. The 30-degree crowd says, hey, I know the risk is stalling, and so I don't want to yank the plane around. I'm going to turn like I always turn. 30 degrees back. There's logic to it. It's not optimum, but that makes sense. I heard 60. I've even heard 90 from one guy. And it's like, I'm an pro guy. I want a 90. All right. I'm here to tell you that I personally think all of those are wrong. I've been working on this project the last 2 years. I think that at cruise altitude, you're going to return an airplane to an airport if you can. Right? So by definition, that's what we do. I did it today, cruising along. Hey, where can I land? Right? Oh, I'm glad. And that little glide path thing grabs an airport, right? It makes you feel good. Like, all right, there's where I'm going. The minimum altitude you're about to see, there isn't one. Even with the same airplane at the same airport, at the same gross weight, I mean, there's so many variables that change this. The best glide speed is good for going a distance, but it's not good for a turn back. And the reason is you're trying in a turn back, you're not trying to maximize how far you go. You're trying to minimize how much altitude you lose. And the aerodynamics and the physics of those two objectives are different. And they result in a different speed. And you'll see here that 45 degrees of angle development. So here's a little bit of science on it. I already tipped my hat on the fact that what we're compromising now is turn rate versus descent rate. We're trying to maximize both of them without favoring one over the other to the extent that it causes your altitude loss to be more than it has to be. On the right here, you see a graph of a function. There's a source there. Hopefully this briefing will be available to everybody. I think it will, David. There's a link here to a really excellent paper that this PhD wrote on the subject, but this is one of his graphs. And basically what it shows is 35 degrees of angle is optimal for a gliding turn if your objective is to lose the least amount of altitude, which is what we're talking about here. Theoretically, your best speed to fly is like half a knot below stall speed. Will result in the least amount of altitude loss in a 45-degree bank turn. That, of course, is dangerous, right? So we want to pad that by some amount, but not so much so that my turn radius starts getting really big and now I'm giving away a lot of altitude. Hence the balance between best glide speed and what we think is probably the best, which is 1.3 times V stall. If you're a speed flyer, if you're an AOA flyer and your instrument is properly calibrated, you basically hold it with on your AOA. Drag is a double-edged sword. And normally we think of drag as a bad thing when you're gliding. If you're trying to go a long ways, you don't want drag. But when you're in a turn back situation, depending on the winds, and having flown a whole bunch of these, sometimes you end up, you turn around and you're so steep you can't land. And so you have the opposite problem. I need more drag as much as I can to get down. And you'll see one of those here in a video that I have. But usually we think of, hey, let's get rid of drag. And there are some things you can do. If you have a controlled pitch propeller, right, you can pull the course pitch, for example. Flaps up, it's less drag than flaps down. Right? So question now becomes to turn or not to turn. Here comes the sad part. Oh, don't know where else I Hey, this isn't so sad. So what's off the end of the runway, right? That's the obvious question. And these are examples from bad to good, basically subjective in my opinion. What kind of terrain would I want to try to crash land an airplane into? On the left is the city down in Los Angeles. On the far right is Ibex Deadpan. If any of you've been there before, that giant, I mean, it's huge. It's like a 10, 15 mile long dry lake that the whole thing's around. It'd be ideal place to use a motor, except for if you're going to go nowhere. But, and here's Truckee, which near and dear to your heart. I just heard in your briefing that this is the preferred runway for departure for the reasons of keeping noise down. It also happens to be pretty good for a turn back or a engine failure because of the same reasons, right? There's not much out here. There is a road. The imagery is a little unclear here, but I think there's a road right here that runs north south. And I didn't look really close whether there are power lines on this. There are. Okay, well that's a problem.
That's a good plug for our emergency landing guide, because there are their own videos of each of those landing.
Yeah. So that, I mean, you might lose your wing, but you're not going to die. Spin around, right? If you crash into a power line pole, depending on how you hit it like that. There's no perfect answer to any of this. You're landing an airplane where it's not supposed to land, right? So something's got to give. The bad thing about doing a turn back to this particular runway is this cliff, if you will. If you don't make it, you have a high potential of going straight into that thing. And that's how people die. So I won't run through all of this. We can get the general idea. I mean, we've all been through this game, right? What's on the end of the runway? You make a judgment. Is it too dangerous to try to land there? So the other question is, can you fly one of these things under high stress, down low to the ground, relatively close to stall speed? Things are going wrong inside the airplane without stalling and dying. That's what you're balancing, hitting a building versus this. And now we're gonna get to the part that's sad here, but makes the point.
Well, good evening to you. We begin with some breaking news. We now know the names of the pilot and passenger in a deadly plane crash this afternoon. I'm Caroline Collins.
And I'm Anthony Antoine. The two men, a father and son, died after a small Cessna plane crash at the Huntsville Municipal Airport around noon. Fox 26's Sherman DeSalle joining us live from the scene. And Sherman, what can you tell us so far?
Yeah, Anthony, good evening. We've been told a tragic update. We were just told from the Texas DPS the name of the pilot, 20-year-old Ethan Cole Bishop, and his father, 43-year-old Elijah Bishop, the passenger. Elijah Bishop is the name listed as the owner of this Cessna, according to the FAA registry website. I'm going to get out of the scene and show you what the scene looks like. Not too much different from an hour ago, and that's because when a plane crashes like this, there's a lot of investigators that have to get here, and they run point. I'm talking about FAA and NTSB specifically. But here's what we know so far. Huntsville police, they reported a small Cessna 150 plane crashed at the south end of this airport around noon. Officials say the plane was taking off when it crashed, and we initially were told that there was one person reported dead, and about an hour later, we heard the second person was confirmed dead. One died on the scene, the other en route to the hospital. And as far as we know, there were only two men on the plane. And keep in mind, this is a Cessna, a common small fixed-wing aircraft used for touring, used for training. We're not sure to what magnitude or what purpose this plane was being used for today, but we do have those confirmed names. Elijah Bishop and Ethan Cole Bishop. Ethan, 20 years old, was listed as the pilot in this crash. His father, 43-year-old Elijah Bishop, listed as the passenger. A pretty tragic update. We'll try to get more information from the FAA and NTSB, but we also know that things like this take time, so there may be some time before we hear more. Reporting from Huntsville, Sherman DeSalle, Fox 26 News.
So obviously tragic, right? So the pilot of the older Elijah, he was an F-15 pilot in the Air Force. That's UC-130's work. In Giants, and he was out teaching his son how to fly. He wanted to join the Air Force. In his post Air Force life, he was a CFII teacher at an aero club, flew corporate jets. My point in bringing this story is, if you read the NTSB report, this is exactly what happened. He and his son tried to do a turn back after fuel starvation caused by contamination in the fuel. Motor quit, they try to turn back, stall, spin back. This was a pilot with lots of experience, you know, by most people's standards, right? And so those of us in the crowd, okay, I'm not ever going to do this. You're not the problem. You're not. I mean, and this accident made me think a lot, and it's ironic in so many ways, but I was literally doing this kind of flight testing to develop this accident happened in September of 23. So if an engine fails after takeoff, these are kind of the logical boxes, if you want to call them that you might end up in. If you decided to do a turn back and it was possible, well, at least your initial decision was good. Whatever happened after that, we're not sure. If you decided to do a turn back and it wasn't possible, well, that was a bad decision. Right? Same thing on the bottom. If you decide not to do it, but you wanted to, but you didn't know if you could or not, well, that's not good. And then, of course, in the bottom right, if you decide I'm not doing one, period, that's a good decision. So what the idea was creating an app that could maybe analyze this. How do you analyze all these factors really quickly and determine yes or no? And that was the genesis of it, which led to, hey, let's investigate sort of dissecting this maneuver so that once you understand the aero and the physics of it, you can actually turn it into math and science and put it in one of these machines. So here we're looking at sort of God's eye view down on a runway in a hypothetical engine loss situation, right? And what on the left here, what you're seeing is a 270, 90-degree port reversal, which basically means the shortest track distance possible to do one of these maneuvers. Then on the right, you have a situation where you're beyond that distance some amount when your potential engine fails. And now you're going to have a turn followed by a level glide of some distance and then a small alignment turn at the end. So that's sort of the track geometry. And you might notice the wind in this slide is coming from the top and the turns are to the left, meaning into the wind, which is generally speaking the way you want to do one of these because you want the wind to help you. I can tell you after going out and flying 30 or 40 of these to test, that's not always true. And I say that because if the wind gets strong enough, these things become, I would say, impossible to fly. To be honest, right? And it gets, when you get 15 knot, 20 knot crosswind, and you try to do one of these things, you just end up overshooting them. It's terrible. I suppose you could probably eventually figure it out, but I haven't. You guys might be able to. But the vertical geometry is the part that gets the most interesting, I think. And then we're going to see here analytically. But just imagine a runway here, and I have 3 hypothetical climb outs leaving that runway. I have a shallow climb, sort of a medium climb, and then a steep high performance climb. And I need a certain altitude, and thinking that people thought, hey, I need a certain altitude to make it back. And that is true out to here, where if you execute a turn back here, you're going to be on the runway. As soon as there's a glide back portion to the turn, or sorry, the return, I should say, now that altitude is going up further you get away from the runway because there's a period of time where you're gliding. So there's sort of the sunk cost of what does it take to do a 270-90, whatever that altitude loss is, that's your minimum penalty that you got to pay. And then the question becomes, do you have to pay more because I happen to be further away from the runway when it happens? And what you can see here is in a high performance climb, it's kind of true. Hey, I got 1 altitude. If I hit that thing, I'm good. In a medium performance climb, I might be good for a while and then I'm not good anymore. And then in a shallow climb, I'm never going to get there. So this guy in the shallow climb, he might take off thinking, hey, as soon as I hit 800, I'm good. But he's not ever going to be good because he's never going to get above the magenta line. Same thing with this guy. He's thinking, hey, I'm good. I hit 800. Well, for a while you're good, and then you're not. This guy, he lucks out because he's got a rocket ship. He can just blast off to the moon. But this gets affected by runway. So the longer the runway becomes, now all of a sudden shallow climbs can end up in that previous category of the thing. Wasn't possible, but now it is possible. And that's all because of how long the runway is. But eventually, you're not going to be able to do it, right? Either you're going to keep climbing in your rocket ship until the density altitude gets you, or you're going to level off at your cruise altitude and start cruising, and eventually get far enough away from the airport that gliding back to the runway is not possible. So lots of variables, length of the runway, weight of the plane, density altitude, power layer of the plane, your chosen climb path. Climb out of VY, climb out of VX. I don't recommend VX, by the way, unless you really have to use it. And if you really have to use it, I wonder why you're there. But and the reason for that is that even in these turnbacks, like we did a bunch of VX turnbacks. The problem is you have to dump the nose so much to get the speed to actually do the turn that what you gained by climbing so steeply, you just basically give away in the dive that results after the engine failure. So our recommendation, if you can do it, is fly VY. Now on a hot summer day, most of us fly faster than that for cooling. That's just back quiet. The nice thing is in a little computer, you can tell it what you're going to do. All right. That's what you're doing. Anyhow, aircraft stuff. pilot stuff, startle effect, bank angle, we already talked about bank angle, 30, 45, 60, they all affect all this. So you can crank all that stuff in and put it in the machine. So, Truckee, demo number 2. Please look at it. Look at that. So what I'm gonna do here is put a Cessna, that same one that we had at Diamond. I'm gonna move it here to Truckee. See if I can share that screen. I want to show a little bit how sensitive the parameters can be. Back here. No, you just kill it. There we go. No, that's right. All right, good. Oh, cool. All right, so we're going to Truckee runway 2. Go to this big sky road, turn it out and fly, so it's all around. So here we are on the ground at Truckee. I do realize that little airplane icon is over here. We're sitting in the building. But the app's smart enough to realize, okay, you're not on the runway yet, so I'm going to assume where you're going to line up. There's like a 50-foot assumption there for where you're actually going to line up for takeoff. You roll out on the runway with the app, it actually will auto update and realize, hey, you're on the runway, where you actually are. But for now, since we're not there, it seems 50 feet. And you can see it, here's our Cessna with its liftoff point and distance to clear the 50-foot obstacle here at Truckee for the current weather conditions and the way that if I put this thing in emergency mode, now it's going to start calculating turn back information. Here, it's saying it's not possible. It's going to change here in a moment. Climbing out at a VY climb, which we can change using 45-degree bank gliding turn, which you can adjust if you decide you don't want to do it that way. At the speed that I suggested, which would be about be killed again. So this VREF speed here is something that you can change. It's currently set to 1.3 times, and it will rerun after. That yellow X, the center of the runway, that's the position where on takeoff, if the motor quits, it's the last place where you can go straight ahead and land and stop on the runway. And as I already telegraphed, it's telling me that I can't turn back under these conditions. So something's got to change. So what I'm going to do here is move the winds manually. I got an 8-knot headwind currently. Here's the waypoint arrow. It's still now it's showing a very small turn back window. We're in that situation where you get one and then it goes back. If I zoom out here, you can see that. So the green dot is where that should occur. I can turn back, and then the red dot is I can no longer turn back. And you'll see if I increase the magnitude of the winds here, those dots will start moving apart. That's just a 1-knot change. So I went from 9, there's 10 knots, there's 11. You can see how dramatic it is. 12 knots. It's a pretty big difference. If I go down to 8, I can't do it at all. From that 12, I'm good. You would never be able to figure that out. We'll sit there and have a one. How much do I weigh today? I pay 1,838. 38. You know, I just can't do that.
Turn back.
It's possible to turn back between the green dot and the red dot, and the altitude band is right here in MSL as computed. Now this is all planning, right? So it's on the ground. It's assuming that you're actually going to fly the way you say you're going to fly, but what if you go out and take off? So it's smart enough to know when you take off and you go into a dynamic mode and you start watching. So the question earlier, where am I in space? What altitude am I? What speed am I? What's my track? This my track angle from the runway. That's how many degrees of turnaround I make. And it's recomputing that every second. And it's telling you what the cat.
So let's assume you're gonna turn back and be on two. I mean, 2-0.
Correct. It's a great question. Multi runways is in the queue of things to do. And I have an idea how they can do it, but right now you're absolutely right. It assumes that you're coming back to the runway to take off on. And here at Truckee, you have the advantage of having.
So are you saying here at Truckee that we have, might be easier sometimes to turn around?
Well, you don't have to turn as much. You kind of depends on where the motor fails.
Does your app take?
Currently, it does not. But what I said is I already have an idea how I think I can make it do multi-runways. That's in my list of things to do. But right now, it assumes that you're on the runway that you tell it, and it will tell you whether you can or cannot take that one. So that's where it is right now. So that's the demo for on the ground. Now I have videos that are going to show you what happens when you fly with it. So let's come out of that. Okay, switched on that. So your choices are land off field or turn back, right? If you're landing off field, you want to maneuver to avoid obstacles, obviously. Pitch to the green donut or your VREF speed. Don't stall, that's the enemy of here, even if you're just turning to avoid obstacles. Troubleshoot if you have time, you probably won't, depends on when it happens, right? It's immediately after takeoff, you have no time. Just put it down. If this happens, 3 miles off the target, maybe have some time to do some real basic stuff. Make a radio call if you have time. Probably less important landing off field, but maybe not. I mean, you can get help on the way, right? You don't know what your conditions going to be like when you get on the ground. And then obviously in down close to the ground, transition to a landing attitude and fly the plane. If you're turning back, pitching to the same speed, VREF or green donut. I don't stall. We talked about bank angles and drag. Depends. If you're trying to minimize drag, flaps are up. Force pitch if you have a controllable pitch propeller. Don't slip the plane. If you need a lot of drag, do all the opposite of that. Right? Throw out your flaps, keep your height, fine pitch on the propeller, slip the plane. Troubleshoot if you have time. Radio call on this one becomes important in case there's someone taking off, and now you're going to go beat the beat. So here's a video of one of my test flights, and we're going to want to scrub through the front part of it, I think. This is a successful one. I've got 2 failures coming after this one. But this one is how it's supposed to work. There we go. That full screen. Is the audio working? Okay, so what you're going to see is I'm going to taxi out to runway, what is it? 12. This is my home airfield on the right. This is what the app is showing you. And you'll see as the aircraft goes down the runway, eventually it goes fast enough where the plane goes, all right, I'm flying. And it flips into flying mode. Initially, it's going to
lined up.
They're telling me I'm lined up. It's going to give us headset cues about whether you're going to go off field or whether a turn back is possible. You can see this is a longer runway. This is my green dot right here. Here's my yellow X for my flash go forward point. As it goes up in the air, the glide footprint will start growing around the airplane. When it's possible, it will announce that it's possible to do this, and that's when I'm going to go idle power flaps 1 to simulate the drag for a and then drop and execute the. So right here, saying go forward, like plan straight ahead. As soon as
Off field.
now it's going to give you the glide footprint. Just correcting for the wind that's coming from the left.
Turn back possible.
Idle power class 1. I'm flying AOA. That's what I like to do. So the green dome is my target. Still debug stuff down at the bottom that I use in the commercial part. But you can see it's kind of a hairy maneuver, even when you know it's coming, right? The odds of someone executing this thing and having never flown it or practiced it, I think are about zero, especially under the stress of the market. Again, giving credence to the idea that maybe the best idea is to go off field. That's a really strong reason not to.
Lined up.
That's the app. Yeah, that's the app doing that. It calls line up on the right because it does some other things that are important to it when you line up actually. So that's that. So we have 2 failed attempts. Both of these fail in the same kind of way. They were more headwind than expected, and they end up really steep on the turn back. And I have that opposite problem I described, where you need lots of drag. And unfortunately, when you're in the turn, a lot of times you don't even know. You haven't figured it out. You can't see the runway, right? Unless you're just superhuman. And you're like most of the way through the turn, by the time you figure out the approach. This is Garden Valley Airport. It's sort of a backcountry strip.
As soon as we get -50, we're going to go. There's -50. Rally traffic through San Juliet. Simulate emergency turn back. Oh yeah, look at that. We got all kinds of altitude. The wind model's messed up. Or it's stronger than we think it is.
Super aggressive, I do.
Garden Valley traffic there, San Juliet, time to go.
Yeah. The second one's not as so lessons I personally learned flying a whole bunch of these and then trying to make a computer figure it out is the wind. It's probably the single most important variable in the equation. Less than 10 knots is sort of ideal, but more than that, it starts getting crazy, even if it's quote unquote helping you. It can help too much. Or if it's a crosswind, then you end up with giant overshoots or undershoots. Training flaps are good for mimicking drag. So I went out and actually during this whole process, shut the motor down for real and start capturing data on glide paths, course pitch, fine pitch, flaps at different settings. For the purposes of finding what is the correct drag setting to use in training that mimics a windmilling prop in real life. In my particular airplane, that's 1 notch of flaps. Problem with that, in terms, it's good for mimicking the drag, but it also gives me more stall margin in training life that I would really have, right? In real life, I have a flat set, probably. So that's a gotcha. The force pitch, I couldn't believe the difference between flying force pitch and gliding. It's a difference. Like in my plane, it'll glide about 9.5 to 1 force pitch, and that can drop down to like 6.5 flying pitch. That's a pretty big difference. 45 degrees of bank, I told you was optimal from a math standpoint, but when you have naturally sliding things and then you look at the data, like even the ones I just showed you on video that I didn't have this 45 degrees of bank. 38, 40 is what, for me personally, I just seems unnatural. I gotta go to 45. Just something that happens. It happens fast, as you saw in the video, and the math works. That's the part that, I mean, as a nerd, I was kind of excited about that, but I was like, oh. I mean, in some cases, it's coming within 10 feet. Just shocking. So, yes, sir.
If the runway has a displaced threshold, which geometry you use the displaced threshold, or you just go around?
Are you asking me, like, as a pilot, if I have an airplane testing, what your app? So the app doesn't, the app will not, well, it really depends on the database. So what the app knows are runway endpoints. In the cases of runways that you create in the app, then it's wherever you put it. But in the case of a database runway that comes in, it's whatever the database has in it. And the nice thing is you can look at the imagery and it draws that rectangle. So you know exactly what it's using. And if you don't like it, you can create your own runway of that same runway with it. Yeah.
Can you build out trucking runway to your airport?
Build it out.
Well, that's slightly this way. Right.
So it's in here, but that's not your question. The question is, it has a display threshold. Yeah, we pulled out Google Earth and started pulling it flat long. Make one right now. There's another option in here where you can survey it, which you probably wouldn't want to do here. Maybe you would. You actually walk out there and stand on it. Go to the other end, which is useful in the backcountry. But maybe not so much here. But here, what I would do is I would pull out Google Earth and pull that long and put them in here. And then save it in you will customize database that save. Like that diamond LZ, that's not the database, that's probably. So I think that's pretty much all I have. Except for questions that might be out there.
Where's the round of applause?
Yeah, sure.
You're down to
I'm sorry.
the track of the. You're not going to turn back. You're down. If you're off airport safe, you're safe. Two. Or the same, 2-9er. Guy being turned back. So, next training, you're down. Okay.
My opinion is gear up, but realistically, I mean, you have so little time, right? And you're probably going to land with whatever you happen to be in.
Oh, yeah, you're.
It's like, yes.
I'm just curious what your opinion.
That's my opinion. But I don't fly retractable, well, so a 4-engine one, but we didn't talk about this one.
He was all for it.
Yes, sir.
Restrictions on the mounting. So there are some restrictions, but I see you have it mounted on the pan. Someone would try to mount that. Use the yes.
No, so I deliberately haven't used the track, GPS track for that exact reason. Because track, well, it doesn't use it. It uses accelerometer to detect takeoff rotation for how far, because it'll record how far your takeoff distance was. I mean, it's designed to be performance. So that's one thing. And then there's a HUD node that I'm messing around with right now that uses accelerometers for Apple EDI. And then it is very sensitive to how you have it handled. But for everything you saw here, and for almost all of its functions, it doesn't, you can put it on the floor as long as it gets a GPS signal so it can create a GPS track. And then it starts looking at track deltas. iOS, for the nerds out there, updates their position once a second. So everything in the app, that's the heartbeat of the entire thing, is that GPS update. So 1 hertz, it recomputes everything. And then so it compares track from last second to track this second to start getting the turn rate, which does have a lag built into the emergency turn back function. It's about a 3-second track lag in iOS. How long it takes to actually it's always about 3 seconds behind the plane. So if you're in an actual turn, you're doing better than it would think unless you push that ahead.
Why is this an accessory to good access for them? We talked about this. It seems like this could be an add-on.
So I don't want to be used to it. I agree with you. In fact, I was a little surprised when this whole thing started that somebody had. Kidding. These things have been out for 20 years now. I used to myself have all these sensors. But no, Fourth Flight and Garmin Pilot, I have a backup, so I don't need to about the differences. This does performance very well. It does basic navigation, where Fourth Flight and Garmin Pilot are exquisitely good at navigating ADS-B, airspace, and all that stuff. But they do performance like we do. And they do.
It's just seems like this should be ideally the visual feature is one of those apps.
I think it ought to be under the glass, like in Garmin or Avidyne or any of those. You ought to be able, like in the C-130, J that we flew, and then it stopped, like on the modern airline and all that stuff. But it's all in the airplane. It was its own performance capabilities. Well, that's what really needs, but it's not there. So yeah, I agree with you. But no, I have to answer your other question. I have not talked to the Fourth Flight about merging or selling or any of that. I haven't talked.
Jeff, I had a question about that. For those who fly with an iPad and maybe they got an iPhone, I was wondering if you recommend some kind of flow of how to use which device during what phase of flight, have the port light up, or is it kind of
I mean, obviously, when I began the project, I had no idea that it would become a commercial product. I was just creating something for me. So, to that point, my airplane, I have a G3X in front of me. On my right panel is an iPad running from the pilot. And I use that as my navigation system. And that is the reason why I designed the performance app to run on the phone. Because I didn't want to compete with the screen in the state that everyone flying Fourth Flight and myself included. I didn't want to have to be flipping back and forth between the two. As you can see, there's a lot of dynamic stuff it does. It's not just a sit on the ground planning tool and put it away. It is, if you buy the free version, it's essentially a calculator. And it's got all the same airplanes, the same aerodynamic engines are in it. It's pretty powerful, the free version, but it is essentially a calculator. Your weight, your temperature, your winds, actually it can't be at all. And it basically spits out what a certified, like a Cessna, you pull up a Cessna table, it's going to give you no wind, paved, level runway, total information for max gross weight. That's what you get. In the app, at least, even in the free version, you can change the weight, and you can vary the temperature conditions in between when you have on tables. So it is better than a table in that sense.
Can you kind of continue there a little bit? That was my question, like the delta between that free version and the middle paid version or the expensive paid version, like for what we saw today in terms of like, if I was looking for that nice sort of before takeoff data about like, where's the points in the runway where I can land back on the runway? Where's the point where, you know, my takeoff holes and lead me? Is that stuff in 3 years? That's not.
So first of all, I would say it's not expensive either.
Yeah.
I mean, the most expensive one, $4 a month. It's not that much. You will not believe how many people at Opcon lectured me about not charging enough. That's a fact. I mean, I exhibited for a week. Have you ever stood on the list I'm talking about? That was fun to do, but I don't think I want to do that again. But yeah, it's funny. But anyhow, to your question, the free version is sort of a calculator. The middle one used to be the top tier actually, but it does a lot. It does all the dynamic navigation stuff. It has the database runways in it. Just told exquisitely, it's updating once a second, moving map stuff, zooming in, looking at else in the morning. You can get it all whether you're stable or not on approach. We need to talk about it. It does lots, but it will not do anything to do with emergency turn back. It won't do data recording. The HUD mode, which I'm working on now, that doesn't exist, but it's going to. And with that, I've been experimenting with AOA and indicators. I don't know if that's going to work. But it may not ever be there. In theory, that seems impossible to do with an iPhone, but I was surprised today on my flight. I'm flying here with access for flying. Anyhow, I don't know where that is.
We had a comment from someone on Zoom saying maybe a trial run for like 7 days of premium being not been tested out.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and here's the honest answer to that exact question. I don't know how to. That is a legit, like, me and Apple are not friends. I don't know how to do that in Apple, but it is also why one of my business strategies a monthly subscription. So the most you're going to be out is $4. It out for a month and go,
That is so cheap in Truckee.
are you kidding me? It's less than a gallon of gas. I mean, it's incredible. I get it because I'm a consumer myself, right? It's weird how the market is like, oh, that's thing costs $1. It's like 4,000 man out. But I get it.
For experimental aircraft, how difficult the data that you got input, how easily is it?
So there are maybe 10 experimentals in there right now, maybe 15 at the very most. To answer your question, so the more data performance data that exists, that's published by somebody that's legit, the better you can make them. The worst plane in there, and the only reason it's in there is because my tank main house is under permanent rocket too in the app. How much data is out there on the permanent rocket? But there is some. I do have the advantage of them being in my hangar, but recently, one of the things I added to that other thing, to the expert level, you can build your own airplane. I added that up. And you go in and enter not that much data, and it's not hard stuff. It's like stall speed, what's your climb speed, what's your climb rate, what's your landing distance, that kind of stuff. And then it reverse engineers there, and then what you enter, and it gives you at the end of that calculation, it'll tell you how good it thinks it was matching what you put in. If you put something in there that's impossible, but aerodynamically, you're going to get a bad match. They will tell you that. To benchmark that exact thing, what I did is that there are existing 37 airplanes that are in there. I built them all out using just the build function. They compare to themselves. That makes sense. And they're pretty tight. I was kind of surprised. It also made me feel like I wasted a lot of time here. Because I could have just done a little custom build thing to start. Not totally true. I mean, it's the ones that are in there and engineered like Cessna 180. It's probably one of the best in terms of accurate models of the entire thing. All the Cessna are pretty tight, actually. And the one that's engineered into the app is better than one that you can just custom made, because you're only given 10 things to write instead of right? So it's just a difference.
Are you grabbing data, say, a whole bunch of hard dates out there?
Right.
Are you able to grab that data?
So
putting it in a pair.
That would be a violation of Apple's privacy policy for me to grab any of that. Now, if people would send it to me, that's that.
Are you requesting?
Yeah, but nobody has sent me their data like that. That's what there's a few. But no, I can't leave. In fact, they won't even stop watching Apple will shut it down. If I try to like capture your data, like it's watching your track flying around and all that, and the app secretly sends it to me on the side. Okay. Which is a good thing, right? We don't want developers. It also inhibits some of it. Question.
Going back to the business. So you started out with some spreadsheets and then it got turned into. Talk about that. Did you have prior to that? I did. So. Okay, so then my second question is, you're not charging one. Putting aside your own time, what's it going to take for you to bring our spreadsheet?
Well, if you discount time, then it's cheap, right? I mean, I bought a laptop.
You have to pay out what we have to pay.
The developer fee is $100 a year. The website fee is $10 a month. I mean, when you get to actual cost like that, it's.
So you haven't hired a single.
I don't know, although that's wrong with Rock. You're familiar with Rock, the AI. Interesting. That's all I would say on that. It didn't work out. Me and Rock didn't work out. I spent hours with Rock trying to get Rock to do an ADI work, and then figure out why every time I moved it was flying everywhere. But no, I have not hired. I would like if the business makes more than pizza money at some point. It would be one of the first projects actually would be furniture for this Apple iOS right now. Another common question.
Without law, nobody goes out. They haven't seen it. But I said you can do it. What do you do to protect yours?
Yeah, the liability thing. So, amen. It's funny because when the spreadsheet that I showed you at the very beginning of the brief, that one would do turbacks. So it's been in my head from the very beginning, right in the math. And then I deliberately didn't put it in because of that question. Until I ran into the EAA dudes at the Oshkosh, and they were like, hey man, you can look at what and do this. Then I started to think, okay, how am I going to protect myself? So the answer to your question, there's several layers, but nothing's perfect, right? One is the Apple end user license written by Apple. You have to read it, it's hundreds of pages long, but it basically says, not my fault. Right? That's the gist of it. The end user license pop-up starts every time you start this thing, which is annoying, I know, but it's there. You have to okay. The glide data for an airplane. So of course, in my version of that, I've entered all the glide data for all these aircraft, glide ratio, glide speed, that kind of thing. If you buy it, you have to enter that for your order. So now you got liability in this one because you're the one that put the glide data in the stupid computer, right? And then of course I don't personally own it, the LLC does. So I don't know, it's about as good as I can do. But you're right. I mean, it's somebody.
There may be one for you're not a big part.
Yeah, they will go in now, right? So it was. But did they go to there? I didn't know that. Who did they stop? Yeah. Coming in. Well, so yeah. But I know we're approaching 7 actually. But before we cut loose, obviously send me a text, give me a call, send me an email, send me feedback, even if it's just on the free version. I can't spend it. That's fine. Free version is a lot better than what we had before. So, thank you. All right. The blue hat's already spoken for, I think I can. So you have a Truckee Tahoe flight state back. Some of the questions asked, I've known Hefe for 21 years within the C-130 community.
This is Pepe. We used to fly AWODs with spreadsheets, on our kneeboards, so I did it. Pepe. So what you're seeing here, I'm just telling you very legitimately, this is just the way this guy's wired. He does incredible stuff with Rand Corporation. He is a nerd. He's really cool as a pilot as well. But this is just kind of who this guy is. And I'm just so thankful he got to come out and hopefully get to check out his app. So we're going to go to Truckee Monkey. I'm going to buy him dinner. I won't buy anything else dinner. We'll go on we'll get a Truckee Monkey in about half an hour. So. All right.
All right. One last round of applause. Thanks everybody on Zoom. We'll catch you next time.
Oh.